All right, let's move on to the next topic here, and we're going to be talking about Blade, because Blade has been nothing short of a disaster. Not a single shot of this film has been filmed. And that is crazy, because Blade was announced in 2019 at San Diego Comic-Con when the initial Phase 4 announcement was made. And that wasn't even all of Phase 4, that was like half of Phase 4 was announced up until Thor: Love and Thunder. And at the time, it was, Mahershala Ali gets on stage. All of them were wearing Blade hats, and they were saying, "Hey, this film's gonna come out in whenever." They didn't give a release date at the time, but they said Mahershala Ali is your new Blade, and they gave the logo and everything, and it was all great and it's all fine. And then it's been radio silent since then. And now we've gotten a new report here. I forget which site it's from, but one of the reputable ones, whether it's the Hollywood Reporter or Variety or Deadline, that really details what's been going on with the production of this film. And while I'm not going to go into all the specifics about this, I'll kind of talk about the major hitting, points that stand out here, because all of these articles do a great job of detailing the timeline here. I will go through a couple of the major pivot points here of what has been going on in this saga of this Blade drama. And then also, I actually kind of want to play a little bit of devil's advocate here and talk about why I think we shouldn't be maybe as worried as perhaps if in any other circumstance, if a film had been delayed for 4 years like this. And also, at the end of the day, why I still am skeptical that this movie will be released at all at this point. Although, again, we'll see. I mean, maybe skeptical is the wrong word. Maybe why I will be unsurprised if this film eventually does not release in its current form. We'll have to see about that, though. But yeah, let's dig into this Blade saga just a little bit. So again, I'm not going to go through every single writer and every single director that has been announced and then left the project. But I mean, just to illustrate the point, right? My channel's been around for 4 years now, and this channel is old enough to have seen the announcement of the first Blade director, named Bassam Tariq, I believe. You can go check it out on my channel. That I had a podcast episode where I talked about Blade getting a director, and I thought at the time, great, I didn't know much about him, but it seemed like a great choice for Blade. We were moving on with the project. Now, this was, I believe, in around 2021. So at the time, it was like, yeah, okay, we're gearing up for the rest of Phase 4, and we're gonna get Blade eventually, maybe like 2022, 2023. So it's important to kind of just keep in the back of your mind that even in 2019, right, with that initial Phase 4 announcement, it wasn't like Blade was imminent, right? It wasn't like Blade was going to come out next year. It was going to come out probably at the end of that timeline. I mean, there's a reason that they didn't really even give a placement to Blade on that timeline. Nothing was really set in stone at that point. So I think that Blade, for what it's worth, was still going to be a couple years, maybe 2-3 years away from that San Diego Comic-Con announcement. That being said, Mahershala Ali at the time was almost 50 years old. I believe he was 49 when that announcement was made. So he wasn't, in terms of superhero, right? He is certainly not the youngest actor in the world. He is certainly, though, a high-quality actor. I mean, he is an Academy Award-winning actor. He's won 2 Academy Awards. And also, he's obviously been known to play ball in the genre film franchises. Obviously, he was in the Luke Cage series as Cottonmouth, I believe. And he's also currently filming the new Jurassic World 4 with Scarlett Johansson. So he is definitely, so if you're talking about a perfect blend of an actor who is high caliber, right? But also an actor who is so willing to be in these franchises, Mahershala Ali is definitely one of them. What this article details as well is that this is a unique situation in which Mahershala Ali himself, after I believe after winning one of his Oscars, basically went up to Marvel and said, hey, I want to do Blade. And Kevin Feige also really wanted to do Blade at that point. And so that was something where that came together. Not really, I suppose it's not really detailed in this article, but my assumption is that it wasn't really something that was specifically on the radar of the MCU, but it came together because of the actor and because of Kevin Feige. And so that's something to keep in mind as well. So then that all happened. 2019 happened. The COVID pandemic happened, and then we got our director announcement in 2021 or 2022, and then we were kind of moving off to the races after that. At that point, though, we had I believe we had a writer attached, but then that writer left, and so between that point and now, Bassam Tariq left the project. And we also had 2 or 3 different writers who were attached to the project as well, including Bo DeMeo, who was the writer for X-Men 97 and who recently just got fired by Disney for undisclosed reasons. And other writers, including Michael Green, was attached to write on the project as well. And finally, to this point, Eric Pearson, who has done a lot in the MCU thus far. He's almost like the MCU's ghostwriter, if you will. Not ghostwriter, ghostwriter. No pun intended there. But yeah, I mean, we've gone through tons of different writers as well. We also had a different director, Jan Demange, I believe, who was handpicked by Mahershala Ali, according to this report. And he... Basically, this report surfaced because Jan Demange just left the project. Although, I should say, it was reported that he just left. It was reported just now that he left the project, because it seems like from everything that we've heard, he left the project a while ago. So it wasn't like, he was attached yesterday and then he left yesterday. That's not at all what happened. So again, this interesting cycle of writers leaving, directors leaving, and Mahershala apparently being very unhappy with the project, as he sees this project as, and this is from the report, as his own version of Black Panther, being, I guess, sort of a touchstone in the comic book movie franchise, sort of a crown jewel in his resume, I suppose. It's not particularly clear if that's what he meant by that, but anyways, Black Panther being sort of the first superhero film to be nominated for Best Picture, or just a defining moment in the comic book movie genre as well. So there's that. And and also what we got out of this report is some story details, because apparently some of the earlier scripts had this film being a period piece set in the 1920s with Mia Goth, who is still attached to play a role in this film, but apparently she was going to be playing Lilith, a vampire who wanted the blood of Blade's daughter in the original version that was set in the 1920s. And now this has been scrapped, and now apparently what they're going to do is they're going to rewrite the film over the summer and then look for directors in the fall and begin shooting at that point, maybe early next year. Mahershala is apparently very unhappy with this, as I would be as well. It's an incredibly frustrating situation to be in. And also to note that this film will be taking in present day as of right now. Okay, so there's a lot to unpack here, right? Because first of all, I've never seen a film like this in the MCU that's gone through this kind of turmoil. It seemed like the DCEU, just for comparison, obviously not entirely negative comparison. The reason I'm bringing this up is just because it seems kind of apt. It seems the closest to what's going on here with Blade. But the DCEU had its own version of this with The Flash, right? And The Flash did eventually come out. But if you guys remember that whole saga, I think Phil Lord and Chris Miller were originally attached to direct The Flash, and then it was going through all these other writers, and all these other, I think even Ezra Miller at one point wrote a version of the script for The Flash. So that was a film also that was, I think, announced in something like 2016, and it was going to come out in 2018, and it came out in 2023 with a completely different story probably, and a completely different set of writers, and a different director, Nanni Muschietti, at that point. So it's not like this doesn't happen in Hollywood, right? It happens to, the biggest and the wealthiest studios in the game. What's interesting about this, though, is that it hasn't happened to Marvel this publicly. And it is interesting to wonder if there is some correlation between this being a project where maybe it wasn't originally supposed to be as integral to the MCU until Mahershala Ali was the one who approached Kevin Feige about wanting to do the project. And I wonder if Kevin has any regrets about that. I don't know what the balance is of Kevin just wanting to do the project anyways, and then Mahershala approaching him. Because, again, we don't want to assume that it was just Mahershala saying, I want to do this project, and Kevin Feige being like, okay, whatever you want, because that doesn't really seem like something that Kevin Feige would do. That being said, though, I wonder about that in terms of if this was a factor that kind of led to this project being stuck in this place where it just doesn't seem like it's getting anywhere. Now, I said at the beginning of this segment that I wanted to play devil's advocate for a little bit here, and why we maybe shouldn't be as worried about this as we are. And let me be upfront and just say, before we kind of get into this devil's advocate, that this is a disaster for Marvel. It's not an unmitigated disaster. It's not like this is an abomination or anything like that. This film could certainly get made, and it could certainly be a good film at this point still. I have no doubt that if you get a good set of writers and a good director, and Mahershala is happy with the script, you could end up with a very good Blade film that comes out next year in November, I believe. That is 100% possible. That being said, this is, as it stands right now, this is certainly just a terrible look for Marvel right now, especially amidst all the other things that have gone on. But I do want to just point out a couple things here. And I think that context, as always, you guys who have been watching me for a while know that I'm a big, proponent of making sure you look at the context. I think context is super important when we're looking at something like this. So first of all, like I mentioned earlier on in the segment, Blade wasn't supposed to come out right after that announcement in 2019. I mean, there's a reason that they put everything else on that timeline. If you go back and watch the 2019 Comic-Con panel, Thor: Love and Thunder was the last project that was there on that timeline. There's a reason that Blade wasn't on there, because probably at the time, Blade was just something that they had just signed Mahershala to, and they knew that they were going to do it eventually, right? So let's be clear here. Blade was not meant to come out like in 2020, COVID pandemic aside. It was not supposed to come out during the next few months after that announcement. It was probably going to come out, if anything, like 2 years later at that point. Then what did we have? We had a pandemic, right? Pandemic pushed back basically everything on that panel by a couple years. So that last project there, Thor: Love and Thunder, came out in July of 2022. So okay, Blade coming out later than that, like 2023, 2024, maybe 2023. Let's just say 2023. Then what did we have? So okay, first stumble here is that, yes, like if everything was going to plan, then I would assume that a Blade film would probably have come out in something like 2023, maybe right after Wakanda Forever or something like that, right? So I think that is sort of the first stumble here. But let's just say that, okay, we go through this first stumble here. What did we have at the end of 2023? We had a writers and an actors strike here. So the film is being delayed, right? It's not going to come out in 2023. They're working on the film, is what the report says, right? And then we have a writers and an actors strike, and then that, pushes back everything as well. Now, again, I'm playing devil's advocate a little bit here just for the sake of the argument. But, going back to the original article, yes, you have a writers and an actors strike, but other films in the MCU, such as Deadpool and Wolverine and such as a Captain America Brave New World, went right back into production right after the writers and actors strike. And so certainly if Blade was on track, right, then it definitely could have gone right back into production as well. So I'm not making excuses for the film, but I just want to say that it's not as if, we're looking at this timeline of Blade being announced in 2019 and then being released in late 2025, 2026 range as, just a crazy unprecedented thing, because we had some crazy unprecedented things happen in between those 2 points. We had the pandemic and we had the writers and actors strike, not to mention Kevin Feige losing control of his authority, over the quality of the MCU and having to put out like 6 Disney Plus shows a year or whatever it was at a certain point, which he is now scaling back, which is I think the reason why they're taking so much time with this Blade project, because Kevin Feige could have just put out a subpar 1920s period piece Blade film, but something tells me he just, as soon as he got that quality control authority back, he just wasn't happy with the way that Blade was turning out, and so he went back to the drawing board. And I think that this is actually an encouraging thing here, because yes, I understand also from Mahershala Ali's perspective, he has every right to be frustrated with this process here. He's not getting any younger. He's still a phenomenal actor, but this was going to be a role that he thought would be defining for his career. I get that. I really do get that. At the same time here, I think that for the Blade project as a whole, we shouldn't be too discouraged about the fact that if this Blade film is going to come out, and I'm not too convinced that it will, because at a certain point, when is Kevin Feige going to say enough is enough, right? We've tried this in so many times. Perhaps this really just isn't fitting with the grander story of the MCU. Although I have my doubts about that, because you've set up a lot of supernatural characters here with your Moon Knights and your Werewolf by Night Man thing. Even Agatha Harkness, for example, that I think Blade does have a role to play in this sort of Midnight Suns sort of grouping of the MCU, which I think could be very interesting and very exciting. So that being said, if this Blade film comes out, which I would be unsurprised if it gets canceled at a certain point, but I also am thinking that it will come out eventually, sooner rather than later. But let's, I think that there are a lot of extenuating circumstances that have delayed this film, but I think that everyone has a right to be frustrated. But I also think that we have every reason to believe that they are still working as hard as they can to bring us the best product that they can. Obviously, for those of us who have been waiting for a Blade film for a long time, this is not the most encouraging news, because it doesn't seem like this film is really gaining that forward momentum that it needs. And the day that it goes into principal photography, even then, I may not believe that this film is going to come out. And it was the same for The Flash, right? And The Flash eventually did come out. And say what you will about that movie, decent amount of people liked it. So I just think that, look, we have to take a look at the context, right? We have to make sure that we understand everything that's going on here. A lot of parties are frustrated by a lot of extenuating circumstances. At the end of the day, I think all that we can hope for is that this new plan, where they're going to rewrite the film, or they're working on a new script with Eric Pearson, kind of co-writing and editing it, and then they're going to look for directors, and hopefully by November 2025, we get a Blade film that we can all enjoy. Fingers crossed, because again, I mean, I hate kind of putting it in these terms here, talking about people's ages like this, but in terms of just physicality and superhero films, Mahershala Ali is certainly not getting any younger. He's in fantastic shape. So I'm not taking anything away from that. But at a certain point, you don't want like a 60-year-old, 70-year-old Mahershala Ali playing Blade. I don't think he wants that as well. So, yeah, it's been a wild ride for this film, but I'm very hopeful that it will come out anyways.